And I've had several conversations over the last few days about how impactful the situation is in the world at the moment, and maybe the sense of building chaos, the distress that's around. So I just wanted to not focus on that in the talk, although for me, what I am talking about in the talk is one of the ways that I'm managing personally. So I just wanted to spend just a moment to say it's really hard at the moment. It's really hard at the moment. And not to invite opinion or ideas, but just to say, can we, between us alone in our practice and together, just what supports us to stay awake as much as possible to the ongoing turmoil and suffering, and manage ourselves and our sweethearts in all of that. And I know I wouldn't be managing to look as much as I can look and stay facing it without my practice. And in a way, that's what kind of really led me to want to continue to focus on the theme from last week. In my scattered reading, I was reading a piece by someone who goes on Instagram called the Tattooed Buddha, and he's an interesting guy. And he was describing whether he was going to kind of live a monk's life or live like alone on his own, living like a monk and walking in his robes, or whether he was going to sort of join in with family and live a much more family life. And he wrote, whether that's with strangers or an impromptu sangha, or my family and you, dear reader, it's fine either way, because whichever way life throws me, reaching out and holding hands is the practice. Reaching out and holding hands is the practice. And he said it's called Wenda. I couldn't find what that meant, but he said it's called Wenda, which is what all the koans are based on. All the koans are based on relationship, on people reaching out from one person to another. So I feel like here I am, reaching out, hoping for hands to hold, and partly because of that deep immersion in ceremony that we had in the retreat, I'm thinking of all the ancestors who've offered me their hands, whether they know it or not. And on the back of my rakusu, it says warm hand to warm heart. And I really kind of feel, as I'm accustoming myself to wearing it, is like, it feels viscerally true that I am here supported by everyone else who was here, who's done this. And we get the little pack of lineage papers, and I could feel the way in which everyone who has tenderly, rigorously, fearfully, philosophically, thoughtfully, crazily, shyly, troubledly carried the Dharma forward. I'm in that company, which is the company of us all, the company of all humans, just as we are. And when Flint asked those of us who were saying a rakusu to prepare our own spiritual lineage, that was a really fascinating process, one I'd highly recommend whether you ever sew or not. And it felt like both a celebration of all those warm hands that I'd had supporting me in my life, and humbling. I started off with a pie chart with like 10 different segments in it, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger, and more and more things in the pie chart, because it was like there's so many chefs have gone into making this very particular and maybe somewhat peculiar stew that's called me. Um, and then last week we heard that talk from Sensei Kathy Fisher called Warm Hand to Warm Hand. And While she was talking, I was thinking a lot about a poem by Hafiz, which is one of my favourites amongst the other 10,000 favourites. But anyway, it's often a favourite. It's called A Great Need. Um, Out of a great need, we are all holding hands and climbing. Not loving is a letting go. Not loving is a letting go. Listen, the terrain around here is far too dangerous for that. Not loving is a letting go. Listen, the terrain around here is far too dangerous for that. And right now, it really feels like the terrain is pretty tricky for all of us. So how do we keep doing this thing called warm hand to warm hand? And like I said, she was talking about it as everything that happens in relationship, a dynamic, fluid process. And I was thinking of a quote by a famous therapist called Erwin Yalom, and he said, "It's the relationship that heals. It's the relationship that heals. It's the relationship that heals." I think he was making a point. So if warm hand to warm hand is about relationship, it's also about love. So it's also about warm heart to warm heart, about one living person to another living person. And sometimes that living person might be someone in a book. I think about Josh's relationship with Suzuki Roshi, who he has never met, and he has so met, because that book is so close to his heart. So it's a human being that we may not even ever meet, but it can still be warm hand to warm hand and warm heart to warm heart. And I was asked, how might we use our teachers? And my response was, I'm not sure that we use them. I think we engage in a relationship, and then everything that comes up in that relationship can come up as a support to our awakening together. That the relationship is the crucible for noticing all the things that arise in, our connection with intimacy, how we are with people, what comes forward, what comes back. So for me, there isn't any one kind of relationship. It's this warm hand, this warm heart at this moment in time, with that warm hand and that warm heart, and the whole history of what we bring together into that moment. And it's just, for me, like when we sit with everything we are, and we start to really notice, if we can create enough space, this feeling is arising, or that feeling is arising, or that feeling is falling away. It's a kind of dynamic relationship. So I don't think of the relationship with the teacher as a static one. It seems to me it's very fluid. And can we just notice? And the more we can notice without judgment or preference for any of it, then there is a kind of ease and more fluidity, and the outer relationship is the mirror that we can see ourselves in, and our conditioning, and also our Buddha nature. That when we're seen by the other as having Buddha nature, we can be quite surprised to find we've got one. But often it's only through the eyes of the other that we see that. And Shozan Jack Haubner said, he was talking about the teacher relationship, and he said, a teacher can sing a song and show you some moves, but ultimately the dance belongs to you. A good teacher gets out of your way, and in this regard, a flawed but honest teacher is often the best teacher. Someone who's learning their own dance, not someone who's already, like on Strictly, the professional, and you're the amateur, and they're going to show you what to do. It's much more is like, okay, here's this flawed human being working alongside this flawed human being, and can we help each other see our Buddha nature in each other? And initially, I really had some strong connection with this quote. And then as I was thinking about it more and sitting with it more, I thought, Of course, it's absolutely your own dance. One of my favorite books is called If You See the Buddha on the Road, Kill Him, which is that kind of like, don't look for the Buddha somewhere else, find your Buddha nature inside. Um, and you make your own dance in the relationship. But it is also constantly this flow, this inner and outer, the outer relationship with the world, which is the only teacher. And as a teacher, I'm in the world. So the world is teaching me and I'm offering something back, as we all do. So this relationship we have with ourselves is like the flow between only a Buddha and a Buddha. And you have to find your own way. But the relationships we have on the path are all lenses to see and meet what our desires and expectations and assumptions are. And I've heard Flint and other teachers say, your teacher will disappoint you. Your teacher will disappoint you. And the way I kind of take that to mean that is, if I have an assumption or an expectation, or I'm looking for my teacher to save me, or to be perfect, or to have all the answers, or any lens that stops me from seeing them clearly as a human being, then we will inevitably and necessarily be disappointed. Just as we are with whatever life serves up, we're also inevitably often disappointed. And I've always loved Flint has a mentor called John Gladfelder, or had a mentor, and he's often quoted the quote about when he asked John Gladfelder what was like the secret of happiness, and he said something like, "Thank you, I have no complaints whatsoever. Thank you very much, I have no complaints whatsoever." And that's a really fascinating prospect, isn't it? Because I could list my complaints till the cows came home. But how to have a place where, oh yeah, they're just complaints. They don't stop. But maybe I'm just not going to take them that seriously. So that's been, how do we sit in this place where we can become disillusioned? And disillusioned is a word that often has a really negative we think of it in a really negative way, to become disillusioned. I pray to be disillusioned. It's like, that's, for me, it's like, to become disillusioned is to drop the illusion that the world is different than how it is, or the world should be different than how it is, or that someone is going to come along and save you, or there is something wrong with you, or you are going to get healed. It is to be disillusioned, for me, is to let go of the perfect you, the one that actually suffers. And there's a koan that many of you have probably heard me quote before, because it's like one of those ones that feels kind of really central to often how I'm thinking, and it's during the Kayun era, which was 1713 to 1741. A long time ago, they were wrestling with this stuff no differently than we are wrestling with this stuff. And an ascetic named Matsu was dwelling in a temple, and all day he sat meditating. And a teacher, a person in the temple called Nanyu, knew that Matsu was a vessel of Dharma. So he actually did this because he could see that something was really trying to come through Matsu, but maybe the way he was going about it wasn't that skillful. So he went up to him and he said, "Great worthy, what are you doing? What are you aiming at by sitting meditation?" And Matsu replied, "I aim to become a Buddha." And Nanyu sat next to him, and he took up a tile. Chinese roofs are made of clay tiles, lovely shaped clay tiles. And he picked up this tile and he began to rub it on a rock in front of the temple, making a horrible noise. And Matsu said, what are you doing? What are you doing rubbing the tile? And Nanyu said, I'm polishing it to make a mirror. And Matsu said, how can you make a mirror by polishing a tile? And Nanyu said, granted that rubbing a tile will not make a mirror, how can sitting meditation make a Buddha? And Matsu was, oh, well then what would be right? And Nanyu said, it's like the case of an ox pulling a cart. If the cart does not go, would it be right to hit the cart, or would it be right to hit the ox? Who's driving this thing? Matsu didn't reply, and Nanyu went on to say, do you think you are practicing sitting meditation, or do you think you are practicing sitting Buddhahood? That's one of the things that Flint has often said to us. Sitting is an enactment, is a celebration of Buddhahood. It's not trying to become Buddha. If you are practicing sitting meditation, meditation is not sitting or lying. If you are practicing sitting Buddhahood, Buddha is not a fixed form in the midst of transitory things. So there's this idea that it's not this solid thing. Your Buddha nature is not a solid thing that you are sitting to find. One should neither grasp nor reject. If you keep the Buddha seated, this is murdering the Buddha. I love that. If you sit down to try and make the Buddha, make yourself into a Buddha, you're murdering them. If you cling to the form of sitting, that's not attaining the inner principle. Matsu heard this teaching as if he was drinking ambrosia. So he really took it in. He was really hearing this practice is not about sitting to become a Buddha. And the koan goes on, and I'd like to leave that for another time because it goes on. But when I think of it, I think of ourselves as we can get really caught in the delusion that we have to become something or somebody else. And that's when we're caught in delusion. And that's where becoming disillusioned can be really rather marvelous. There's a writer you've heard me quote before. He's a Yoruba social philosopher called Bayo Akamalafi. He writes in a beautiful lyrical kind of way, and he says, I've been thinking about wounds as striation marks, the kind of scars, and fault lines that invisibly compose bodies prior to the event of injury. That is, the wounds don't come after the fact. The surface might appear smooth, the membrane unpunctured, unperturbed, the skin at rest. But what wholeness occludes are the necessary tensions and troubling experiments in brokenness that keep things alive. That actually it's all the things inside of us that aren't perfect, that we try and cover up with our perfect skins or our perfect hairs or our perfect bodies or our perfect Instagram posts or whatever. But actually, it's all this tension and mess inside that is actually our aliveness. We are indebted to the lack of coherence. We are never not broken. I love that. We're never not broken. We just try and keep a really nice skin on so that we look perfect. And becoming disillusioned is to recognize our imperfectness as just the state of life. So that's his take on the fact that perfect is always waiting to become broken. And that's where our aliveness is. So it's opening to our essential wholeness, and it's leaning into our vulnerability and brokenness that is actually what life is trying to offer us. So we sit here alone and together with a teacher who's also sitting alone and together. Between us, we create a dance that allows us both to see our wholeness and our brokenness and celebrate the whole damn thing. You are not a tile to be polished. You are a Buddha who often sees themselves as a Buddha by being seen as a Buddha by another, by our teachers, by life. And Flint has said that a spiritual friend is one who expects more of ourselves than we do. And by that, I think he often means someone who is prepared to see and hold our essential nature, that they won't agree with us that we're broken or need polishing or rubbish or that we're not lovable. We're going to our friends can be someone who's going to love you and not let go of that idea. We are the warm hand for each other. We are the warm heart that invites us into awakening. And I just came across this piece on my great Dharma friend Instagram. And there's a writer and climate activist who's not a Buddhist, as far as I know. But he is a passionate climate activist who is looking full on at the ridiculous lemming-like behavior we have as we hurtle towards the edge of the cliff. And he says this is Dharma without the Buddha. He said, life is a gift and you didn't earn it. You didn't earn your mother's gestating you, and you never paid for that. You didn't earn the sun or water. It's a tremendous gift, and acknowledging that and really taking it in is transformative. Life is a gift, and acknowledging that is really transformative. When you've grown up in a culture that ignores the fact that because when you know that you have been so richly gifted, we've grown up in a culture that ignores the fact that life is a gift, and we don't know. But when we know that we've been richly gifted this life, the natural response is gratitude and the desire to give in turn. Generosity comes from gratitude. And that is really half the purpose of life, to give of the gift of life that we received toward life. That's what life does. It creates more life. And that's half of our purpose here. And the other half, obviously, is to receive. Because the gift of life is not a one-time gift. It's an ongoing gift. And I mean life not just in the sense of the organism striving to stay alive, but I mean the fullness of life, which includes the richness of experience, all of the joys and pleasures, awestruck apprehension of the miracles of the magnificence of nature, the sights and the sounds, and the pain also, but also what's on the other side of pain, the love and the connection that we all receive, that we're here to receive, and the more fully we receive, the more grateful we are, and the more we have to give. That's that cycle of warm heart to warm heart, warm hand to warm hand. This constant flow, this constant dance of receiving and giving, giving and receiver. Ultimately, where we can be in a place where we say no giver, no gift, no receiver, just one flow of life. I need to hold hands. We need to hold hands in the storm that is our current life unfolding. And we need to learn what our own dance looks like, which we can only do by dancing with the other. Thank you.